Hey everyone, and welcome to Almost Cancelled. I am Peter, that is Connor, and we are going to talk about Carnival Row, Season 1, Episode 1. It's called Some Dark God Wakes. And this is Amazon Prime's new original show, starring Orlando Bloom and Cara Delevingne, if I'm saying her name correctly, which I think I am.
Annoyingly, I think you are.
I think it's right. So this is their new fantasy show. This is a first episode, so we will start spoiler free. We'll give you our sort of general thoughts and impressions, and then we'll give you a warning before we go into spoilers in the middle of the review. So, So this is a high fantasy show. It is based on a book series. I'm pretty sure. I don't actually know that for sure off the top of my head, but I'm going to take a wild stab and say it's based on a book.
They usually are.
Yeah. And the opening starts with a lot of exposition. There's a bit of voiceover or in text, just kind of.
No, there isn't a voiceover, is it? It's just text.
This is the thing. I watched this in Dark Crystal back to back, and Dark Crystal had voiceover.
That was a comparison I wanted to make at some point.
And they start with very similar premises. So if I mix up any conceptual things, forgive me, but. Because they both feature lands of mystical creatures, and then another party comes in. In this case, with Carnival Row, the human beings come in and take over the magical land. But there's two factions of humans. There's the Burg, who are kind of the better ones, we'll say, because they're not exactly peachy either. And then there's the evil ones who just want to dominate everything, called the Pact. The Pact won, though. The Burg retreated. And now, because of that, a lot of the magical creatures, the pixies and the other races, a lot of them have fled to the Burg's homeland and are essentially refugees. And there's a lot of allegories in here, a lot of direct sort of racism and refugee kind of storylines going on, the way they're treated. There's a lot of really direct sort of in-your-face dialogue about it. It just kind of feels like a lot of things you'll have heard before, but just in this case it's about pixies and the other races. There's like a horned race that I didn't quite catch the name of. So that's the general gist of it. The main characters, Orlando Bloom's character, what was his name again?
Philo.
I've forgotten. Yeah, Rycroft Philo Strait is his full name. He is one of the Burg. He was in the army, and he had a romance with Vignette, which is the most stupid name I have ever heard for a character. That's Cara's character, and she's a pixie. So it was kind of a not forbidden thing, but not necessarily, not normal. Kind of looked down upon having a romance with a character like that. And she thinks he's dead from the war, and finds out in the course of this episode that he is in fact not dead. He is a detective in Carnival Row, which is the rough patch of the city, and he is investigating a series of beatings. A human is beating up pixies with a hammer once every 3 weeks. And it's a kind of a... obviously, he's not killing them, so I wouldn't say it's quite Jack the Ripper, but the name they give him is kind of very Jack the Ripper-esque.
That's just because his name's Jack that they call him, isn't it?
Yeah, but I feel that's what they were going for, especially with the time period aesthetics that they've got going.
Oh, definitely. And it's... Orlando is not quite Sherlock, is what I'm going to kind of put it.
Yeah.
Very intentionally kind of that feeling. The Burg is very clearly England, and complete with accents and.
Oh yeah, everyone's got an English accent. And I don't know if all the pixies had, but at least Cara Delevingne was rocking an Irish accent. I don't know if they all had though.
Yeah, they were very intentionally, because the pixie land where they come from is called Tir na Nog, which in Irish mythology, their kind of other world where their gods are, their Asgard is called Tir na Nog. So it's very clearly just that's a stand-in for Ireland, and there's a lot of that in this episode.
Yeah, I'm not really. I don't know much about that history, so I was just kind of reading it as typical fantasy tropes more than anything else.
It still is, but it's just got a bit more specificity to it.
Because when we got into the racist stuff, all the racism that was coming from the cops and the locals and the humans, I wasn't necessarily thinking of England and Ireland there. I was just thinking of more general broad strokes.
It definitely works in broad strokes terms, but I think there are some specific things that do tie it to England and Ireland.
That's fair. So I guess I'll ask you then, what did you think of this first episode?
I would say I despise at least half of it. and the other half is tolerable.
Okay, it's very enthusiastic. I mean, I wasn't expecting to like this because I'm not a fantasy person. So obviously I love getting this and Dark Crystal on the same day, the best day of my week. So I'm not a big fantasy person, but there was some morbid curiosity to see what they do, and annoyingly, there's one scene I quite like. There's one element.
One scene.
There's one scene that introduces something. I'm like, oh, this is actually the most interesting thing about this episode. They could have done.
Is it the final scene?
It's the final scene. Because it introduced a whole new element. I'm like, you know what? I actually kind of like the idea of this part of it, but I could do without all the pixies and shit and all that crap.
See, that doesn't bother. I mean, that is the half I dislike, but not because of the fantasy elements. Because
Sure.
unlike you, I am a fantasy guy. I quite like some fantasy, and hey, big high-profile fantasy show. Sure, sign me up. If you go back to any of the times where this was announced, and we talk about on the news videos, I was pretty excited in concept. But Kara is a pretty terrible actress, and I kind of hate every scene she's in.
Delevingne, that is, yeah. It's just weird to call an actor by their first name. I don't know, it sounds odd.
It is, but I forgot her second name for a second.
Just call her eyebrows. That's what I remember.
Yeah.
She's got those big eyebrows.
She really does.
Yeah, I don't like her as an actress either. I don't even like Orlando Bloom that much either. So I don't like either lead actor, and I don't like fantasy. So coming out of this, it was a very tough sell that I was going to be into this.
Yeah, Orlando Bloom, I don't love him, but I don't have strong feelings against him. He's sometimes okay.
He's a tangential Luke Evans, and Luke Evans I don't particularly like that much either.
I like him more than Luke Evans. Although it's weird hearing him do, his voice, the accent, he basically just sounds like Danny Dyer. And that was giving me a chuckle every so often.
Yeah, it's funny because obviously it's a very big budget show. They've put a lot of money into this, and it's shot 2-3-5-2-1, which I do like that more shows are doing that now. It's just a normal thing at this point. But I will say, if I was to describe how it looks in terms of the production values, I would say that it's very big budget and the effects are very good for a TV show. I would probably describe it as a movie level effects, but from like mid to late 2000s. Like that's how I would place it in terms of how it looks effects wise.
And again, as a TV show, we don't hold that against it too much, because for a TV show,
that's actually fairly impressive that it's up to that level of effects. No, I'm not saying that I didn't notice CG like looking elements, because I did.
Yeah, definitely.
But like,
pretty good. Not amazing, but pretty good.
Yeah, for a TV show, it looked pretty good.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the episode kind of boils down to a couple of plots. It was hard, and when I say the racist stuff, like, went into more broad aspects. When Delevingne gets to the mainland, she becomes, her main plot is that she becomes a house servant for this rich family. Now, maybe that happened with Irish people in England, and I just don't know about it. But that definitely made me think of white and black people in America, and slaves. It made me think of that way more than it did anything else. But so you've got that. You've got the investigation from Bloom, where he's looking for this violent suspect. And he's like investigating that, and that's mostly your main two plots. There is a couple of other things, kind of like Jared Harris is in there. There's only one scene with him really.
In Parliament.
Yeah, and it sets up his son, who's also going to be a character that's around. There's another pixie who works at the brothel. Who we kind of meet, who it turns out ends up knowing Delevingne's character from the past. So there's all these things that set up. So the episode has a lot of setup. There's not a whole lot of like complete plot in this one, as opposed to just really setting up the characters.
Well, that's the thing. I will give credit to the Orlando Bloom plot in that it does have a complete arc, to some extent, more than the others do, I would say.
That's fair. I think so. I mean, I don't really like the show, and I'm not really into it just because of my taste, first and foremost. But obviously, I'm not going to hold that against the show itself. If I'm going to actually critique the show and what it does in this pilot, I don't think it rushes anything too much, which is nice. But I do have to critique some of the big choices. The big one being, and again, this is not a spoiler, this is all in the trailer, this idea that Delavigne thinks Bloom is dead, and then when she gets to the mainland, she finds out he's alive. The actual moment she finds out is such a nothing moment that is not utilized in any dramatic way. It is just, she hears about it, and a very nonchalant kind of moment that's not, like, this could be the end of episode cliffhanger. This could be like, she runs into him and it's like this big shocking moment, and it's not, it's just nothing.
In a conversation.
It's just casually in a conversation, which doesn't mean anything to us yet because we've never seen them together. We know from like her having a photograph that they were a thing, and that's it.
That's all, yeah.
So the moment plays as nothing, and given that they're meant to be our two leads, it really underscores the entire build to their first interaction, which I also feels kind of, just nothing by the time it happens. And yeah, I'm not a fan of her as an actress, so none of her stuff really played that well for me, in general, as it was.
I think it's her delivery. Like it's always just flat.
Because the other Pixie lady, Fife, her name was, like, I actually thought she had way more charisma. She was way more likable from the second she was on screen. And Delavigne, just, I don't know, she reminds me a lot of the worst of the two Mara sisters, who basically I feel is always very one note and mopey, and doesn't know how to, I don't know, have any charm, I guess.
It's lack of charisma, isn't it?
Lack of charisma. There's very little to find in her that's likable. And not that she's in a plot that she should be in a happy mood or anything like that. She's in a really depressing plot where she she tries to save people, it doesn't work. She ends up being a slave.
Even when she's reunited with a friend that she hasn't seen in years.
Yeah. And
that is unequivocally a happy moment. I don't really get much from her.
Yeah. So I think even if I liked a lot of other things about the show, I think the two lead actors would take me out of it. As it is, I'm not really into most of the show anyway. I'm not into like the person she serves, the rich sister and brother. The sister specifically, she's kind of her personal maid, but it's like this rich brother and sister who live together. And I wasn't interested in her plot. I wasn't interested in her looking for a husband because she's turning 23 and doesn't have any suitors. The horror.
Yeah. And then being incredibly racist.
But I mean, at least that's like just like par for the course with her character. That's
it's consistent.
It's the point for her character is that she is this person, but
it is. Yeah.
I didn't find her plot all that interesting. Is the big problem, because it felt like it was playing through. There's like one element of her plot that's kind of on its own with the new neighbor. I won't get into it because I think that is a spoiler to say where it goes. But it just feels like it's playing through the natural beats that it would be. Nothing really surprising happens. Nothing really like they made me go, oh, that's what they're going to do with this character. This plot.
No, that's the thing with this plot where I say, oh, she's really racist, and you're like, oh yeah, no, that's fine. That's the point of a character. That's all that the plot kind of is, ultimately. Every scene with her kind of boils down to that. Yeah.
Well, no, I mean, that's why it's not interesting. Like, I think it's fine that her character is this way, because that's the point of her character, but the problem is that her story in this episode never gives us a hint that there's anything more to her than just being that.
It's got to have more going on than that.
So that's kind of rough. Like I said, the one final scene did kind of introduce an element which I did not know was going to be in the show, and I like the idea of a show about that specifically, but I could happily remove a lot of what the rest of it is and just have it be that that it's about. Everything else I could happily get rid of. It's funny actually, because a lot of the dialogue was making me think of like when they're walking through the streets and random people are just being racist and heckling the Pixies and stuff. It reminded me of like a lot of video games and just like the NPCs shouting things at you as you're walking past them. That's what it felt like. It really wants to be Witcher 3. It's just not Witcher 3.
It's nowhere near that, no.
But it really wants to be. That's the feeling they're going for as you're going through Carnival Row.
Yeah.
Because as I was saying early on, when they introduced Orlando Bloom, they introduced him when there's a couple of cops being really racist to this little vendor who's selling meat, to the Horn race, and they're being awful, and they're going to get her to like leave and not sell anything. They're going to say, "Oh, you did a license for this, but you can buy one from us." They're basically just extorting money out of her.
Yeah, it's a racket.
Orlando Bloom walks in and plays the hero, and it's meant to be the scene that tells us that he's the good guy, that he's someone we can root for. And it's just a really unimpressive interaction where he does kind of save the day, but it's a very just nothing scene. He doesn't do anything impressive in it. I felt very underwhelmed by it.
No, and you know what is a real problem in his second scene?
Mm-hmm.
Ultimately kind of just plays the same beat where he goes to visit one of the victims of the attacks to try and get information, and it ultimately boils down to, hey, you're a good guy, not like everyone else. And I'm like, well, one of these scenes is redundant, probably the first one, because this one had other plot information that we needed, but also the other one at least tried to show it instead of just having characters tell us it like 4 different times.
Yeah, and that's another problem with the backstory in this, is that it kind of is all exposition. And obviously that's true of a lot of backstories, but because this is this mythical world, and one of the things that I don't like about fantasy is that everything's got its own goddamn name. We can't use any locations. We can't all these types of people have their own races and names. Where they come from has its own name. Throughout the episode there was little cards coming up saying this is where they are and things like that, and I'm like, this is all just made up. And I love it in other things. I love the DC universe. I love it all having its own cities. But here's the thing when it comes to that stuff like that is typically you just start watching Batman or reading Batman and you learn about Gotham City. It's one place. And you get that ingrained in your skull before you eventually try a different character and you learn about some other city, right?
I will say this feels like a weird complaint to specify, with fantasy, when you're quite a big sci-fi guy.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a lot of, especially, space-related sci-fi where it will do this exact same thing, just cut in between planets.
It's true. Here's the thing, though, and this might sound like a really petty thing to say.
It's going to.
Sci-fi tends to do a lot better at picking names that aren't stupid and harder to remember. I struggle with fantasy names because they're all goddamn stupid.
I think this is just a case of what you're used to, because as a so I grew up reading a lot more fantasy than I ever, even watching sci-fi with experience. Most fantasy names aren't a problem for me.
So much of this is gobbledygook, and I think part of the problem is just introducing too much of it too quick, to an extent.
So I say I wanted to talk about a little bit of comparison with Dark Crystal, given that it's another big fantasy show on a rival service. That
don't reveal how you feel about it though, because this is going up first.
I know. Well, I'll reveal how I feel about the very opening.
Okay.
We talk about how the opening text, and this is worse than Dark Crystal because this is just, here's some text, read it, and there's just nothing in the background, not really. A couple of statues, I think, is what this shows over it.
Yeah.
And I checked the time; it goes on for I think 90 seconds of this, just reading text with nothing happening. Dark Crystal, by comparison, is, okay, it has a narrator. It's not someone reading it. There's animation happening in the background. It's inherently just more interesting, even if it goes, I don't know how long that one goes on, maybe a minute, or maybe about the same.
Yeah.
But there are visual cues, there's audio. It's more interesting than just sitting and reading for the first 90 seconds of your TV
I'll give you most of that. I will say, though, that to play devil's advocate here, Dark Crystal has the advantage where it doesn't really matter what they show because all of it's puppetry and animation. So they can just do anything anytime.
Sure.
If that makes sense.
Sure.
I guess what I'm saying here is the idea is that they're talking about these big impressive battles, but it's like, we don't have the budget to quite do that, so we're just going to tell you about it.
I get that, but even if you just show me rather, because it's just 2 or 3 statues that it changes between.
Honestly, I'm going to complain about both here and say I think they both hit you with too much exposition at the start.
That's fair. I'm saying one is better than the other. I'm not saying either of them are good.
I think
here.
I really wish, I think I would get into more fantasy if they dished out the exposition, and because see if this episode just focused on one character, made a compelling story with that one character so that I get really into them and get invested, and then next episode introduce one of the other elements and just sort of do it gradually. I think fantasy is so obsessed with exploring too much too quick that they have to introduce so much of the world right away.
Do you know what I would say is quite funny about most fantasy, not all, is you can take away that opening narrative, just cut it completely. and you would probably pick up most of it throughout the episode anyway, because they know, they know for a fact you're not going to remember all of this information because it's just a big info dump, which is meaningless anyway.
Yeah, but that annoys me at the moment. I hate when I get to the end of that narration and I'm like, I'm not going to remember all this.
No, I know. I'm not
me.
defending it as a practice. I'm saying 9 times out of 10, you can cut it and it won't matter. The only times it usually adds anything are on a rewatch or a reread or whatever it is, where you actually have context for this now and it makes sense to you. That first time around, you can usually just ignore it and you will still pick up everything you need to know in the episode when it's well written.
Because I would, like I say, I would have just taken, say, Bloom's character, made the first episode about the investigation, just focus on that, and we could just get a hint that there was a war at some point, and get a hint that there's other place, this other place that these characters are coming from.
This is what I'm saying. You'd have got all the stuff about the war. You'd have got in the Parliament scene, right, with Jared Harris.
No, but I still think it'd be too much in the episode. I think it's too much to introduce in the episode.
Okay, fair enough. That's. I mean, I'm not arguing with that.
Because I think you take in the information better when you're able to just focus on something, and if you spend a whole episode just learning 2 or 3 key things about one side of it, and then introduce the element of the ship coming from the other land, in episode 2, and we learn about where they're coming from, and maybe learn about the war in that episode, and then you introduce.
I don't disagree with this. I'm just saying, if you ignore all the bit at the start and just take that out where it tells you about the war, you still learn about the war through people talking about it. We learn. I mean, in this instance, we'd learn. Okay, well, that we got all the refugees fleeing because of this. We know that.
May I compare this to Firefly for a second? Because Firefly's first episode opens with a flashback of the end, and this is a war specifically. This is why I'm using this as an example, because Firefly has a war and it's recent history. Well, like this show does. I don't know if we get an exact year count since the war ended, but it doesn't seem like it's been that long. It's kind
of been that long because they don't look particularly younger.
It's within the last 10 years. So Firefly opens with the final battle of the war, right? And we've been reviewing Firefly. We've been going back and doing it, as part of Already Cancelled, and we praised a lot of that first episode for being, the best of the best in terms of introducing a lot of characters and introducing all your plot elements in a really neat way that doesn't feel like it's overbearing you or anything like that, right? And that opening scene is an example of that, where you get a lot of who, at least 2 of the characters are mainly just Mallow. You get a lot of who that main character is in that battle, and you get what this war means to him, which is kind of the main point of it. But you get the end of the fight, and it's not narration, it's not text, it's showing us the end of the battle, and you get the point where he realizes the decision was made by higher ups to withdraw. It may be in this case you'd do something slightly different, where you'd have maybe the point where the Burg decide to withdraw, because as we hear in that scene where Jared Harris, they didn't necessarily have to, they made a choice to, they could have maybe kept fighting and possibly won, at least some of them believe that, so they made a choice to withdraw. And I feel like if you introduce it visually and you make one simple point about it, you don't necessarily try and explain the entire conflict, because in that opening scene in Serenity, you don't necessarily understand who the Alliance are, you don't necessarily understand who the Browncoats are, you just understand what it means to this one character, so it's relevant for his arc over the course of the episode. So maybe in this case you got Bloom, but the problem is with Bloom is they want to make it mysterious as to why he faked his death, and why, how he left and things like that. They want mystery.
Which is my argument here, is if you literally just cut the opening narration or script, as it may be, the writers, you keep that for yourselves. It's good backstory for you to know. I don't need to know it at that point. But then you still have, just bear with me a second. You still have, Delavigne going on the ship. We open with her, running away and flying off onto the ship, and being like, right, I can't do it anymore. I'm going. We still have, she goes down into the hold and she has the conversation about, about Bloom, that, oh, hey, there was a thing in the war, but he died. We get all the context we need. There was recently a war. It affected her personally. He died. You just don't need that opening narration.
I think you do in this episode, because they have so much going on that I think you need to have a bit of a primer for it. But like I say, I don't think they should have introduced so much. Maybe I've been saying you start episode 1 with just focusing on Bloom. Maybe you do the opposite. You start with Delavigne, because that introduces maybe more of the mythology. and you end it with her finding out that he's alive, and you do episode 2 that ends at the same place. You start with Bloom on the other side of it, and like follow it from that side, and again you're introducing just part of the thing on each side. I probably would start with Bloom just because
you want to ease people in, start with something that's more familiar.
It's more familiar because it's just a simple investigation. You get the racism of the world, but you don't necessarily have to get much of the mythology. Because I think once you draw people in, they're more inherently curious about the mythology. And in episode 2, if you go to Delavine's side and get the ship and all her coming, and and plus it would be exciting in episode 2 when she looks at the photo and says, "Oh, we know him. He was the guy from episode 1. This is going to overlap at some point. It's going to be a big deal." And maybe she finds out at the end of the second episode that he's alive, kind of thing. And this is something where I know people are going to disagree with me on, because some people obviously love fantasy, they love these big worlds that have all this mythology, and I love mythology in other genres. I do, I get it, but I really think just like, and this is definitely not the worst example of it. I don't think this is the worst of the worst when it comes to introducing too much.
It's just another example.
It's another example, but I think of sci-fi shows that I like and how they introduce the opening. In the opening episode, like their expansive worlds and how they make things very clear. Firefly is a fantastic example. The Expanse is another one more recently, which does a really.
Should be fair. There are definitely sci-fi shows that suffer from similar.
Oh, there absolutely is. But I feel like every fantasy show I've tried is guilty of it.
Yeah, possibly.
I remember, like, everyone loves Game of Thrones. At the end of the Game of Thrones pilot, I was like, there's like 50 characters. I have no idea what's going on.
To be fair, though, I actually will defend that pilot in the sense that 90% of it takes place in one area, and it's okay. We've got our main family, the Starks, and it's other people coming to meet them. So we actually start for the first half or so of the episode. We start with that family. And then we get enough to know who they are, and then we have their opinions on the characters coming in. So I do think that works a lot better in introducing things. I think that was just your taste.
But better than this for sure. But I definitely remember feeling at the end of that first episode that I just like nothing drew me in because it didn't give me like characters to latch onto. And maybe that is a taste thing because I just don't like Game of Thrones, and other people obviously love it. But you made me forget what point I was going to make. I was building to a point.
You were talking about how some people might like this. They like big mythology. You like it in other things.
Oh yeah, no, If you look at The Expanse, right, was the example I was getting to. That took an event and it focused the entire first episode around an event. It did have like a subplot where it introduced another character, sure, and had two things going. It did, but like for the most part, it kept it focused on one idea. And there was definitely two, like, very clear, like, main characters in that first episode, even though, like, obviously that shows more of an ensemble and, like, introduced more stuff as we went on. But if you think
interestingly, Expanse kept that going throughout a lot of its episodes where, we're focused on this one thing.
Yeah, which I think is the smarter option. I think that's a better way to tell stories like this. But that show... Like, if you think about all the characters that have become like main characters in the ensemble since that first episode, they're all there for the most part in that first episode. But you don't necessarily remember Amos that much from that first episode. You don't necessarily remember Alex that much from that first episode. But by the time you get halfway through the season, they've spent time building them all up, and it's like, okay, this is our main core characters now. We have this set. Whereas this episode, and other shows are guilty of this too, and that's not to say it's impossible, because the other example I used was Firefly, which is like a masterclass, and here's how you introduce 9 characters, and by the end of the episode, feel like you understand all 9 of them and how they all interact with each other. Because I think the way I always like to phrase it with that show is that by the end of that first episode, you almost understand in your head like how any pair of those 9 would like feel about each other and how they'd interact on a one-on-one scenario. Like, you almost could pair up any 2 of them out of the 9, and you would be able to do that after one episode, which is super impressive. And I think that's the other thing for me in this episode is that the characters feel a lot more two-dimensional than I would like.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
In a TV show like this. All like they all feel like they're here to just serve the exact plot that wants to be told.
Like in terms of our 2 leads, they've kind of got one thing. She's going, "Oh, I'm in mourning because I lost him," and he's just doing right. I'm doing the investigation.
Yeah,
but everything is just that. He's like, okay, I'm the investigator type.
I don't think they're interesting characters. I think he basically, he's the good guy, but he's definitely got something to be guilty about, and why he ran and hid his death, or not hid his death, he pretended to be dead. And he's emotionally unavailable. We kind of get enough evidence to see that. And then, I don't know, they're just not interesting characters. Everything in this show feels tailored to just serve the plot that it wants to tell. It doesn't really feel like there are characters beyond that. And good characters, good writing does that, where you feel like they feel more well-rounded people. Where you can name something about them that isn't just their purpose in the plot. But this, so far, I'm not getting any of that. So
no, and I would say there's not enough. Annoyingly, there's not enough good fantasy TV for me to point out as examples of this. I can do it in fantasy books, but I think there is a problem with the adaptations. That maybe they're choosing the wrong things. Maybe it's just poor adaptations. I don't know.
I think that's the other problem for me, actually, with fantasy. And again, I don't really read any fantasy books, so if it's better than those, then great. But I feel like almost every fantasy thing I see, I feel like I just see the archetypes for the characters, as opposed to seeing unique characters. I see, okay, this is this character, and from that we typically have. Now, it's not true in this one, but in a lot of fantasy, that there's the chosen one, and they're trying to save the world, and
that's true in a lot of bad fantasy.
Yeah,
I would say there's a lot more bad fantasy because it is so easy to just fall back on those tropes. Good fantasy maybe utilizes those. I've read good fantasy with a chosen one element, but goes above and beyond, right? With that character, where it's more than just the chosen one.
Yeah, I'm getting like shades of other things in here. I'm getting a little bit of Penny Dreadful in there.
Yeah.
I don't know what else I'd compare it to, but yeah, and there is, as for adults, there's swearing, there's a bit of nudity. In fact, I'm pretty sure there's a couple of scenes in here that are just for weirdos who really want to imagine having sex with pixies, because
it there's a couple of these scenes that go, well, but we're on Amazon, we do what we want. They don't add anything, is what I'm saying. There's nothing that's particularly appealing. Has a purpose beyond just, hey, we can get away with this. We say it a lot about some HBO shows do this, or a lot of HBO shows do that.
Yeah, I think there's a cynical side of it that goes, well, they want this to be their Game of Thrones, until Lord of the Rings hits anyway. They want it to be the Game of Thrones, so they're going to throw in some nudity and stuff, which is something they might not do in the Lord of the Rings, because they want Lord of the Rings to be more
traditional,
family friendly, I guess, because not super young kids, but they want young teens and 12-year-olds and whatnot to be watching it. So yeah, I guess we'll give the spoiler warning, and we can dive into the spoilers. Although before I do that, I'll just let you know that you can support everything we do over at Patreon, patreon.com/MailFuzzTV. You can support us for as little as $1 per month and keep all the reviews coming, TV content, movie podcasts, all that kind of thing. And you get some bonuses, you get some early stuff. So go and have a look and see if you're interested. But yeah, so full spoilers for Carnival Row episode 1. Not a whole lot to say. The main thing I want to talk about is the final scene, because the investigation from Bloom is basically, he gets a description of the person. They've got mutton chops. They're in a uniform. He thinks it's like this racist cop at first, but then it turns out, no, wait a minute. The timeline of every 3 weeks these attacks happen is when the sailors come in. They always go out for 3 weeks and come back, this group of sailors. So it's a sailor. And there's a tattoo on a forearm, so he kind of just finds he deliberately stumbles into a guy
to go into the bar where all the sailors are, see one with mutton chops, kind of make an excuse to see his arm.
Yeah, and I didn't really think much of this chase scene. He started chasing him up on the rooftops. It felt very. I
liked parts of it. There was a bit where once they'd separated, they're on like separate buildings, and the guy he's chasing goes through the building, and he has to go over, and they're on these separate bridges, and there's a bit of a nice camera movement there that I thought was all right.
I think for me, it felt, this was the scene out of the episode that felt the most like soundstagey to me. Like I could almost feel the backdrop, as opposed to.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah, because when we're on the street in Carnival Road, they've clearly built these sets, and it looks quite good. It looks, high production value. When they're up here on the roof, they've got the traditional sort of backdrop and on the fake roof set, and I'm like, it felt a bit iffy.
I don't disagree with that.
Yeah.
No,
Of course, nowadays it's green screen as opposed to an actual backdrop, but it's the same difference. Like it feels.
it is. Yeah.
Yeah. But before this guy commits suicide for what he's done, he doesn't want to go in. He's like, no, they've brought a darkness to the city. They've brought it with them. It's below our very feet. And I saw things when I was in the war, things out in the ocean that you wouldn't believe. But this is worse. This is beneath this. So obviously it's setting up whatever the big bad of the season is going to be. And we get a scene at the end where this woman is attacked, and we see just enough of this thing that comes out the sewer that looks very Cthulhu-esque. And this was the only time in the episode where I sort of sat up and went, "Oh, is this like a secret Cthulhu kind of Lovecraftian inspired like horror enemy that they're doing for the season?"
Yeah.
And I'm like, "Damn, I wish I liked the rest of this show because I'd actually be interested in that."
Yeah. I'm with you. This is actually another big part of the Irish English relations. To me at least, anyway, this felt their brains something with them, but this feels like or maybe it was actually already here and they're just reawakening it because I say it's already under the city.
So how does this relate to England and Ireland?
It does actually. Catholicism. In that England started off as a Catholic, but then there was a splinter, and we got Church of England, and Protestants. We got these splinter groups that became the main religion of the country.
Okay.
And then after a lot of Irish troubles, the Irish came over and brought Catholicism back in significant force. And obviously, a lot of English really hated that. So I thought that was maybe interesting there.
I get. I'm more interested in just Cthulhu being scary and looking cool.
Sure.
I saw
that's always fun.
I saw that tentacle mouth and I went, "Oh, is it enough to make me want to watch episode 2? It is not even remotely. I have no interest in watching another single minute of this. I don't think it's the worst thing ever, though. I think I want to make this clear. It's just, for me, this is thoroughly mediocre. It's going through a lot of tropes. I don't particularly like the characters or the acting, and because of that, but the production value is very high. I think the shooting style is okay.
It's fine, yeah. I think for me, it's the acting that really ruins it. Especially, it's confirmed where you get the scene where they're together. She goes and finds him that overnight, and threatens him a little bit. And the two of them, when that's the crux of the show, is going to be these two together. And there was nothing between them in this scene. I didn't feel any sort of chemistry.
No chemistry.
And that's the point where I went, nope, that's it. Because this is the point of the show.
Before the Cthulhu style thing at the end, the hook of this show really should be the desire for them to make up and fight side by side, because that's ultimately where we're going, and that's what you should be longing for as a viewer. And not only do I not really like either character, I have no interest in them being together.
Yeah.
So, it really left just like a damp taste in my mouth. And then of course, like I say, there was a whole pixie sex scene with the Jared Harris's son who gets kidnapped after. But is this really prolonged sex scene where the pixie starts flying mid sex and sort of brings them up while they're having sex, and this is just like because we can do it, just because we want to have this visual of like her with the wings, and I'm like, yeah, okay, sure. Go ahead, I suppose. I'm like, all I could think is that there's some weirdo out there who's really into this. Like they're really turned on by this pixie sex.
There is, yeah.
Yeah, I was actually surprised because the episode opens with Delavine and all these other pixies running from the pact. They're being chased out of where they live, and she's the only one who gets onto the boat, and then the boat gets sunk, and she's the only one who survives.
Felt very convenient, didn't it?
That felt very convenient. But I thought because we started with the pact that we were going to see more of them, and we don't. I guess they're going to save them as the big bad for later.
I would not be surprised if that's more season 2.
Very possibly. It's interesting to me. It's interesting to me to do that, and I get they want to do all the racism stuff, but it's interesting to me that they set up the pact as obviously they're the real bad guys. But then we deal with the fact that a lot of the Burg are extremely unwelcoming of
they're
everyone.
not particularly good guys, are they?
Yeah. And, Jared Harris, when he's making his speech at one point, says, let's not forget why we have to take so many of these people in. It's because we kind of went and ruined everything in their homeland. So Jared Harris is supposed to be fairly likable. Honestly, don't get enough with him though to really get a feel for his character in
There's
this.
only really that one main scene where
Yeah.
they're in whatever they call their parliament. Nicely designed room. I quite like that, the round room.
Yeah. Production design put a lot of effort in. It's not necessarily to my taste per se. This is the thing. Like, I would much rather you take out the fantasy stuff, just make this Victorian England, have actual Jack the Ripper, and still have the Cthulhu. Like, just have it be about
No, I know.
the coming
I
of
know you
dread.
would. I'm not huge on the Victorian aesthetic in general. In my fantasy, that's kind of I like it. Okay, go further back or go further forward to much more modern. This is kind of that weird point where I'm not really into it, personally.
I mean, I'm not
Uh,
into it either, but that's because it's fantasy.
well, I mean, on the scale of fantasy timelines, you've
Sure.
got your ultra sword and shield, kind of classic. You got your medieval feudal bit, and you've got like, okay, we go all the way forward to urban fantasy where we're in more or less modern day cities. Uh, of course, you can go further than that and go into a steampunk fantasy as well. But this Victorian, I'm not feeling it. I never do.
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, I mean, obviously, I was never really going to like it, but coming out of it, I can't say it's the worst thing ever. I can't say it's terrible, but it's just extremely mediocre and nothing. Because the one thing we said the rich sister is she goes off to meet the new neighbor, thinking, oh, you might be single and be a suitor, and is shocked and horrified to discover that he's one of the horned race, and later on she's like, "Oh, we couldn't get out there fast enough." Of course, what's the world coming to? Someone like that living on our street, just doing kind of the same beats. And but this point, we'd really kind of we'd gotten the point.
By that point, like, yes, I get it. She's racist.
Yeah,
And like, that's what I mean. Where that's all she has all episode, and I'm just sick of it by this point.
yeah, they're hitting the same beats over and over again, and there's very little to, I don't know, very little to make them likable. I think the writing just isn't there, and for me, the writing would have to be really good to overcome my taste. But you combine mediocre writing with my taste, and this is just a complete no sell. So
Yeah.
That is Carnival Row episode 1. There wasn't a whole lot to talk about in spoilers, really. I mean, it was mainly the ending, their meeting for the first time. The two main characters, and that sort of little twist, I guess, with the neighbor.
Because which is why I say the Orlando Bloom stuff, I think, has a more defined plot, an ending in this episode. Because he finds the guy who he was after. He catches the serial killer. So whereas nothing else really felt like it had anything to it that kind of felt like, okay, that's an ending for an episode.
It was kind of underwhelming. I feel like, again, because I wanted to, one of the reasons why I would wanted to focus on the one plot is I feel like because all these other things were taking time from it, it didn't feel like there was enough in the investigation to really make it feel like a big deal when he found them.
Oh, I agree. I'm not saying it's particularly amazing, just more that at least it had an ending. So it kind of had a conclusion, unlike a lot of the other arcs. Although I will say I really hated when we see the monster at the end and you get the guy's final speech played over it again. I'm like,
yeah.
I don't need this. I got it. Context.
Because I think one of the things that could be really engaging about the show is the idea that a lot of the cops around them can't be trusted because they're all racist. But the way it handles it is very kind of blunt, and it doesn't there's not this
almost nonchalant.
Yeah, there's not this feeling of mistrust or dread. It's just kind of like he's very confrontational with them as soon as he suspects one of them, and it's just, I don't know, it's not as entertaining or interesting as it could be. Like I say, I think the writing just isn't there to actually make the core beats compelling. And yeah, I this was a full hour. It was a bit of a slog to get through for me. It wasn't the worst thing ever, but I can't really recommend it. If you're really into fantasy, maybe check it out. Maybe you'll like it more than we do. I think the critics in general, I think the Metacritic's in the 50s right now, so it's been
not amazing.
It's been lukewarm. It's been a very lukewarm reception to it.
And I say I am into fantasy as a rule. Not all fantasy, obviously, but significantly more than you are. And this did very little for me. I mean, specifically, mythology. I mean, you know how much I love mythology, Pete. and this is touching on a lot of Irish mythology beats there, and it's just not enough when the writing's not there.
Yeah. So there you go. That is Carnival Row episode 1 from Amazon Prime. As my cat nudges the camera. That is so that's been episode 1. Let us know what you thought of it in the comments below. Feel free to come back and tell us in the comments how you feel about the whole season if you do watch the rest of it. Does it get significantly better? Not that we're going to go back and finish it if it is better, but it's always nice to hear that people enjoy it even if we don't. So let us know what you thought of the first episode. Like and subscribe. As we said earlier, go to Patreon if you want to support us that way. Of course, you can check out other content we have if you listen to the audio feed. Of course, this is in the Almost Cancelled TV Reviews feed. Check out the Netflix feed as well for our Netflix reviews, where you can find a review of Dark Crystal, of course. And there's other TV shows coming up in the near future. There's like a new show from Netflix like every week next month. So
pretty much, and who knows how many of them we'll enjoy and stick with, but maybe one of them.
Yeah, they're all things that are kind of unknown quantities. They're all like just, we'll try those and we'll see what they're like. This one was a kind of a weird one because we kind of had a feeling we weren't going to like it, but gave it a try anyway to see if it won me over. And it wasn't as painful as I thought it might be, but I didn't like it. Like I'm not, I'm good. So there you go. That has been us. So thank you once again for watching or listening. We always appreciate it. Keep watching TV, guys. Have you got any vanilla?